28 Years Later is a movie 23 years in the making. One of these days, I'll think of a better intro for these videos than just saying the title. This film series is an interesting one for me. I only just saw the first two films 28 days later and 28 weeks later for the first time in the last couple of months after the trailers for 28 Years Later got me insanely hyped for it. But honestly, it shouldn't have taken a trailer for a new movie for me to finally check out this series. I love zombie stories, or to be more specific, I love post-apocalypse stories in general. Whether you've got zombies, monkeys, mushrooms, or these things, if you show me a rugged man with a nice thick beard roaming around in an overgrown jungle, I'm there. Bonus points if the rugged man with a nice thick beard is guarding a small child. I can't really explain why this story appeals to me so much, but I can say for sure that it stems from The Walking Dead. This show and the comics that inspired it were a huge part of my teenage years and honestly helped get me through middle and high school. And it was this obsession with The Walking Dead which should have sent me to 28 Days Later. 28 Days Later was the primary inspiration for The Walking Dead. Both stories featured the protagonist awaking from a coma in the middle of the zombie apocalypse and being forced to adjust to the fact that the world was destroyed while they were asleep. But beyond that, 28 Days Later was also responsible for all of the zombie stories which came out afterwards. The Walking Dead, Zombieland, Shaun of the Dead, Dawn of the Dead, I Am Legend. Yes, some of these were based on books or films that came out before 28 Days Later, but they only got adapted into films because of 28 Days Later. I Am Legend would probably never have been adapted into a film if it weren't for 28 Days Later coming out and wowing the world. It was a trendsetter in every sense of the word. Now, fast forward 23 years. We're on the 6th Walking Dead spin-off show. The Walking Dead TV show itself crashed and burned, tanking its own reputation to the point that it's thought of as nothing more than an embarrassing corporate product by the public which once showered it with views and monies. We've got 3 Quiet Place movies, a 4th installment in the Planet of the Apes reboot trilogy, The Last of Us Remastered, The Last of Us Part 2, The Last of Us Part 1, The Last of Us Part 2 Remastered, The Last of Us Complete, The Last of Us TV show. The apocalypse thing is super played out. And in comes 28 years later. The zombie genre is played out, like I already said, but I was still excited to see this. I was excited to see what the director and writer duo behind the original trendsetter would do with a zombie story in a world where the zombie genre has been completely and utterly played out. And even if it wasn't good, I would still be down for an okay zombie story. So what did I get? I got a very interesting film. I'm not entirely sure what I think of this movie. It's got tons and tons of things about it that I like, and it also has lots of things that I don't like. The film itself is a coming-of-age story revolving around the character Spike. Spike is a 12-year-old boy who, at the start of the movie, journeys with his father Jamie outside of the guarded community they live in to go on his first zombie hunt. While the father-son duo are out in the depths of zombie country, Spike discovers that there is another survivor living near their community who was a doctor before the apocalypse. This is important because Spike's mother, Isla, is bedridden with a mysterious illness and has not been able to get help because there's no doctor in the community itself. Jamie tells Spike that they can't take Isla to the doctor because the doctor is actually crazy and spends his free time killing other survivors and arranging their bodies in weird patterns for unknown reasons. Spike doesn't think that this is sufficient reason not to ask him for help, and so he sneaks out of the community with his mother with the intention of taking her to Dr. Voldemort. The rest of the film focuses on their journey. That's the basic plot. Nothing groundbreaking, but pretty good. I'm not super stoked that the story ditches our rugged, bearded survivor Jamie a quarter of the way in, but what are you gonna do? That's just personal preference. The thing about this film that I like the most is the unique version of the apocalypse it paints. If you've watched the first 2 films, you know that the first film ends with the British government. Yes, this series is set in the UK. I'm so sorry, just try not to look at their teeth and you'll be alright. Beginning to quarantine the zombie apocalypse. The second film features a second outbreak happening in the middle of the US government attempting to get the British Isles back up and running, resulting in the zombies managing to get out of Britain and into mainland Europe. This film establishes that in the 28 years since, the rest of the world managed to stop the zombie spread and reconfined them to the British Isles, and then completely quarantined the Isles. So the only part of the world that's actually caught in the post-apocalypse is the British Isles. I think this is a really cool idea, and it factors into the plot when a Swedish soldier accidentally gets marooned in the Scottish Highlands after his quarantine patrol gets beached. He has these weird things like smartphones, which Spike has never seen before, makes reference to the internet, and even has a picture of his girlfriend who Spike thinks is having an allergic reaction to shellfish because of the lip fillers she uses. Remember, this is 28 years after the first film came out, which was set in 2002. Spike and everyone else in the Isles has only ever seen 2002-era technology, if they've seen any technology at all. No one in this community even uses guns, they all use bows and arrows, and even that little detail is paid off in Spike's interactions with the Swedish chef. Eric, I believe his name was. Spoiler alert, by the way. The film doesn't call attention to it, but Spike is clearly taken aback by Eric's gun and how destructive and loud it is. I like it. You don't see many apocalypse stories which are able to take advantage of scenarios like this. Men and women who've grown up in a society where the world ended in 2002, but go outside of that one corner of the world and everything else is running just fine. The MCU took over the world, Luke Skywalker almost killed his nephew in his sleep, Joker and Parasite were the best movies of 2019, and so on. At least, I assume. Some things would probably be different. We wouldn't have Sherlock. And the sequel trilogy was filmed in England. Maybe things would be different. Huh. Is losing England worth it to stop the sequel trilogy from happening? It means we don't get Sherlock. Or Doctor Who. Would I sacrifice Sherlock, Doctor Who, and the entirety of the British Isles to stop Luke Skywalker from trying to kill his nephew in his sleep? No, I've got to think of the people. I prefer the reality we're living in. You're welcome, Britain. I'm choosing not to sacrifice you. The cinematography in this movie is phenomenal. The shots of the zombies stalking over the horizon are blood-chilling. The shots of Jamie and Spike running from zombies in the middle of the night, underneath the starry sky completely unobstructed by air pollution, is beautiful. The landscape shots of our various characters throughout the Scottish Highlands are breathtaking. This is a very good-looking movie, and it was shot almost entirely on an iPhone. In terms of story, like I said, I wasn't super impressed by it. Not just because the film spent most of its time following the 12-year-old rather than his father, but also because I didn't really buy the journey the kid was making. He's bringing his mom into a zombie-infested wilderness, his mother who is bedridden almost 24/7, and the film expects you to believe that they can make it all the way to Dr. Voldemort without getting killed a dozen times over. This is partially explained by the introduction of the Swedish soldier ex machina, character, but there's a lot of time that he's not with them. And I don't believe that they'd survive in those instances by themselves. Speaking of the Swedish chef, I think this character was a flat-out bad decision narratively. He's introduced simply to save Spike and Isla from getting killed by zombies, he acts as their bodyguard for a couple of minutes, and then he dies right before they reach Dr. Voldemort. He only exists to get Spike and his mother from point A to point B, probably because the writer realized while writing that a 12-year-old and his invalid mother would be 12 different kinds of dead within a day of leaving their community. He's also characterized almost exclusively as a jerk, probably because the writer knew he was going to be killing the guy as soon as Spike and Isla found Voldemort and didn't want audiences to get too attached to him. The movie tries to trick you into believing he's a character, but he's definitely not. Speaking of, that also happens with Spike's dad, Jamie. Jamie is portrayed, I think, as a good dad and father at the beginning of the movie, encouraging to Spike and willing to put his life on the line to make sure he gets home safe. When they get home, Jamie talks up Spike to the rest of the community, highlighting his successes and glazing over his failures to paint his son in the best possible light. This man clearly loves his son, and wants the rest of the community to love his son as much as he does. On the day that they leave, he makes bacon to celebrate Spike becoming a man, and tries to lie that he ate some bacon while cooking it, so that his son won't offer any to him. Bacon's a scarce commodity in this world, and Jamie wants his son to have as much as possible. Every possible step of the way, he's putting his son above himself and trying to facilitate him being both a man and a pillar in their community. Then at the party to celebrate Spike returning from his hunt, he cheats on his wife with someone at the party, and when confronted about it by Spike, he hits him for disrespecting him. And it's left kind of ambiguous as to whether he chose not to bring Isla to Dr. Voldemort because he actually believes Voldemort is crazy, or because he just wants her to die so he can have free reign to date his mistress publicly. This feels like a complete disservice to the character they were originally portraying, and I assume that the reason for it is because the movie knows he's not going to be in it for much longer. This is a coming-of-age story, so Spike needs to make his journey without his father figure. That's how coming-of-age stories go. You write the older mentor figure out so that the younger character can truly come of age on his own. So we need an excuse for this boy to go out on his own without his father. So how about we just turn him into a dodgy abuser 30 or so minutes in? Spike has to go on his own because his dad is actually a really bad guy who possibly wants Isla to die. Except the dad was already shown to love his son genuinely. So as soon as they found out Spike was gone, he would go after him, like any good father would. But Jamie doesn't. He just stays at the settlement. Does he actually not care about Spike? Maybe. But at the end of the movie, Spike returns to the village and leaves a note for his dad telling him that he's not going to be coming back for a while. And when his dad gets the note, he tries to run after his son, but only goes a few steps outside of the community before giving up. Is he scared? He almost let himself get killed multiple times at the beginning of the movie to save Spike, so that can't be it. This movie has a problem in that regard. It has a specific story it needs to tell, a story which requires Spike to take Isla to Voldemort by himself, but it knows that that's not actually possible, so it airdrops in a Swedish chef with a machine gun to protect them for a while, then kills him off as soon as he's not necessary anymore. And in the case of Jamie and Eric, the film portrays them both as unrepentant jerks right before they're written out because it doesn't want you asking why they're not present anymore. This movie was shot back-to-back with a sequel, 28 years later, The Bone Temple, and it ends on a cliffhanger to tease the next movie. It's essentially 28 years later, part 1. I'm not pointing this out because I think it's a problem. I'm pointing it out because I think they really mismanaged their time. If they were already planning a sequel, I think they should have spent way more time with Spike and Jamie in this movie. This movie should have been the movie where Spike is getting taught by Jamie everything he needs to survive. The first 30 minutes of them stuck outside in the zombie wilderness for a whole night and separated from their community should have been the full movie. Spike's confrontation with Jamie should have happened near the end of the film, and the film should have ended with Spike leaving with Isla to find Voldemort on his own. This movie feels like it's speedrunning all the plot points it knows are necessary, but doesn't want to tell. The filmmakers wanted to tell a story of a young boy growing up in the apocalypse, going out on his own after initially going with his dad, and making his way through the apocalypse on his own. But to tell that story, it's necessary to first tell the story of him being trained in the apocalypse by his dad. The fact that Spike and his mother would still be completely SOL after leaving on their own would still be a problem for the second movie to deal with, but at least we'd have a solid wolf and cub story for this movie. But that wasn't the story the filmmakers were interested in. They just knew it was necessary for the story they wanted to tell. I feel like a good comparison would be if George Lucas had wanted to tell The Empire Strikes Back first, but knew that he needed to make A New Hope to set up Luke's backstory, relationship with Obi-Wan and the Rebels, etc., and so had the first 30 minutes of Empire be the story of A New Hope instead of the Battle of Hoth. That's probably the main problem I have with this film. Not only is the story it's telling not one I'm particularly interested in, it's the fact that the story it's telling is one that can't realistically happen. The film realizes this and so goes through a lot of sloppy, rushed writing choices to try to make it more believable, but it's still not believable, and as a result, it squanders parts of the story that I really liked. The other major criticism I have for this movie is its opening scene. The opening scene is set during the initial zombie outbreak in 2002 and follows a young boy named Jimmy whose family is killed by the zombies. He runs out to a nearby church where his priest father is praying, tries to get his dad to help, but unfortunately for Jimmy, his dad's a Christian in a big-budget Hollywood movie. Silly Jimmy being related to a Christian, one of these days you'll learn. His dad sort of, kind of, not really references the Book of Revelation, equates the zombies to God's divine judgment, says that everyone who's become a zombie has been saved, and then he allows himself to be eaten by the zombies. Jimmy escapes and flees. At the end of the film, an adult Jimmy shows up to save Spike from being killed by a group of zombies. He has a bunch of followers who all dress like him and style their hair like his, and are all named Jimmy as well. It's some kind of Jimmy cult. Jimmy offers to let Spike join him, and that's it. Come back next year to find out what happens with Spike and the cult. What do I like about these scenes? I like Jimmy's name for two reasons. One, everyone in this film talks with a Scottish accent, because it's set in the Scottish Highlands, and the names Jimmy and Jamie sound pretty similar in said accent. It seemed to me like the movie was trying to deliberately trick viewers into thinking that Jamie was the Jimmy from the prologue all grown up. This is speculation, I don't know for sure, but if this was done intentionally, I think it's a clever little writing touch. The other thing I like is that Cillian Murphy's character from the first film was also named Jim, and Cillian is set to appear as Jim in the next film. I assume that the reused name Jim for this cult has something to do with the original Jim, and I think that could be a cool plot thread if it does play out in the next movie. What do I not like? I am sick of every Christian character in stories like this being portrayed as crazy nut jobs. It wasn't clever the first 100 times it was done. It wasn't clever when The Last of Us did it for the 101st time back in 2023, and it's not clever the 102nd time now. It'd be breaking more ground if you made the Christian characters good guys in these movies. It's boring. Find a different belief system to mock in your movies, please. And those are the summation of my thoughts on this film. It's not bad, per se, but it's not very good either. I don't know that I would really recommend going to see it in theaters. It would be worth a watch on streaming, but frankly, if you're already watching something on streaming, there are lots of other better zombie / post-apocalypse stories out there to choose from. So, yeah, it's kind of not a recommendation from me. Thank you so much for watching this video, especially so if you stayed until the end. Please like, share, and subscribe if you found it to be a favorable experience.